Good afternoon. Oh, that was good. My name is Hannah Kyle, and I am the coordinator for this year's International Development Roundtable Speaker Series. The Development Roundtable is a high-profile speaker series where leaders and practitioners within the international development sphere address our students, faculty, and the broader community on trends and challenges that are shaping the field. On behalf of the International Development Program, I would like to welcome all of you to today's event. It is an absolute honor to host Carrie Hessler-Radelet, Director of Project Concern International and formerly Director of the United States Peace Corps, to SAIS. Dr. Tanvi Nagpal, who will be introducing Carrie Hessler-Radelet, is the Associate Director of the International Development Program and Practitioner in Residence here at SAIS. She has over 2 decades of experience in international development policy, research, and program management in East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. Her work focuses on urban environmental services and governance with a focus on water and sanitation. Dr. Nagpal teaches classes on service delivery and urbanization and leads the practicum capstone for master's students in the International Development Program. She is also an affiliated scholar at the Urban Institute. I would now like to invite Professor Nagpal to introduce our honored guest, Carrie Hessler-Radelet.
Thank you, Hannah. Good afternoon. It's an honor to have Carrie Hessler-Radelet here at SAIS. She's currently beginning an exciting role at Project Concern International as their director, but it would be a dereliction of duty to not mention her tenure as the 19th Director of the United States Peace Corps from 2014 to 2017, after having served as Deputy Director of the agency from 2010 and to 2014. And I know that's why most of you are here. So, welcome to SAIS. Carrie began her career in international development as a Peace Corps volunteer in Western Samoa from 1981 to 1984, teaching secondary school with her husband, Steve Radelet, who is also an excellent friend of our IDEV program. Upon her return to the United States, she was the public affairs manager at the Peace Corps Regional Office in Boston. From there, she served as the executive director of the Special Olympics in the Gambia, planning, developing, and managing the Gambia's first national Special Olympics Games. She went on to spend more than 2 decades working in public health, focusing on HIV/AIDS and maternal and child health. She's been instrumental in forging innovative strategic partnerships such as Let Girls Learn, a powerful whole-of-government collaboration with First Lady Michelle Obama to expand access to education for adolescent girls around the world. During her time at Peace Corps, she successfully pioneered new application processes that led to an impressive increase in applicants, and she also guided the agency through restructuring of its medical branch and new congressional legislation targeting volunteer safety. Carrie is the recipient of honorary degrees from many universities. She received the Society for International Development Award for Outstanding Leadership in International Development just last year. And Carrie also holds a Master of Science in Health Policy and Management from the Harvard School of Public Health and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Boston University. So with that, I'm going to welcome you up here for the Development Roundtable, and please come and join us. Carrie will be taking questions by herself from the podium after her speech. So thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. I think this might be a different kind of speech, to be honest with you. The title was Reflections, and I'm really going to spend a lot of time reflecting. I want to say right up front that because I'm no longer Peace Corps Director, and I am not yet, I don't start yet with Project Concern until April 3rd. I'm actually a free agent now. And the views that I express are not the views of Peace Corps or PCI. In fact, some of the views I'm going to express I actually could not have spoken while I was Peace Corps Director. So let me just say that, okay? Not that I'm going to say anything that radical. I'm going to just start by a very brief 101 on Peace Corps. Peace Corps is 55 years old right now, although next week we will be 56. The executive order was signed by JFK on March 1st after only less than 2 months in office. That was very quick. It was started with the radical idea that peace could only really come through profound understanding and appreciation of others' cultures. And that the relationships of trust needed to be built not only at the level of leaders, but common people as well, people of communities. And so it was a very different idea, and now Peace Corps is very well established, but at the very beginning, it was really considered, a strange idea. And in fact, Sergeant Shriver, who is our first director, liked to say that the only reason he was appointed director of the Peace Corps is because his brother-in-law, JFK, was so uncertain of this concept that he thought it'd be easier to fire his brother-in-law than a political appointee. And he's right about that, by the way. So it was considered a very radical idea in its beginning. Peace Corps now, as I said earlier, is nearly 56 years old. It has been guided by its same mission since the very beginning, which is world peace and friendship, based on its premise. We're guided also by 3 goals, the first of which is a development goal, which is to help the people of our partner nations to build institutional and individual capacity so that they can develop their own nation. The second goal is to promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of people served, and then the third goal is to promote a better understanding of other people on the part of Americans. So the mission and goal have continued to guide the Peace Corps since its founding. And in fact, the volunteer experience is very similar now to what it was then in terms of the actual context of the work. So volunteers serve for 2 years. They live and work in a community. The idea is that they get to know deeply their community. They understand the language. They understand the culture. They live in the same kind of houses. They live at the same subsistence living as their neighbors. They ride public transportation. They learn to love the local food. You become thrilled about having sheep's intestines, or in my case, sea slug, or perhaps fermented yak milk. These become part of your regular diet. And you really develop, most importantly, profound relationships of trust with the people who you serve. And those relationships of trust and the ability to see the world through the eyes of your community are what give you both the understanding of the opportunities and barriers to development, but also the credibility to be able to introduce new tools and approaches to the community that will enable them to lift themselves out of poverty. So that's the basic Peace Corps model. It has not changed. The lived presence in the community is the most important part of the Peace Corps. And I do believe that it is really what makes it fundamental from all other work and gives it its strength and power. I want to share my own personal Peace Corps story, because Peace Corps is transformative. It changes the lives of the volunteers who serve, and it also changes the lives of those whose lives we touch. So as you heard earlier, I'm from Tanvi. I served with my husband in Samoa. I was a teacher at a secondary school. But the most important relationship at my time there was my relationship with my host mother. My host mother was Losa. She was married to Vianney, and they had 8 children when I arrived. Losa was 32 when I arrived. I was 25. She already had 8 children. About 6 months into my service there, I came home from school one day, and Losa was weeping bitterly. She was crying that kind of deep, kind of body cry where you can't even breathe. She was sobbing, and I thought that maybe she had lost one of her children. I'd never seen someone so distressed in all my life. And it turned out that the reason she was crying was because she found out that she was pregnant again with her 9th child. And she did not know how she was going to be able to cope. She was a subsistence farmer. She and her husband farmed a very small chunk of land, taro, which is hard to farm. You've got to hack it out of the soil with a machete and a sickle. She got up every day at 4 a.m. to build a fire, cook the food, boil water to wash clothes, and prepare the meal long before anyone else got up. She'd feed the kids and feed her husband. The kids would go off to school, and they always had spotless uniforms. I would say that about them too. They lived in a small folly which is a house with thatched roof and 11 posts around the outside. It was completely open to the air. Everybody slept on the floor next to each other at night. After the kids went to school, she went to the farm and harvested some taro to take to the market and sell. She'd get home in time to welcome the kids back from school and prepare them a little bit of lunch and help them with their homework. After that, she would, make the evening meal, help the kids with their homework, and fall into bed about 9 o'clock. She could not imagine how they were going to make it with another child. She had never had any prenatal care. I asked her, where do you go for prenatal services? I knew nothing about pregnancy, but I did know that my mother went to prenatal care. And she said, I've never had that. I've delivered all of my babies here on the floor of my house, attended by Vianney's mother. So I said to her, Losa, I know there's a clinic down there. It's only 1 mile from our house. Why don't we just go together and see the person who's there, see the midwife? I didn't know these people, but I had seen the clinic. And she reluctantly agreed, and we went together. And the midwife, who was incredibly wise, took one look at her and she said, Losa, you need to come once a month for prenatal care. You need to take these iron folate tablets, and you need to deliver your baby here at the facility. She was crestfallen because she knew that Vianney would never allow her to deliver her baby at the facility. And she wasn't even certain that Vianney would allow her to even come back to the clinic. So we went back to her house that day, and we told Vianney about what the midwife had said. And sure enough, Vianney said, there's no way you're going to deliver your baby at that facility, because Samoan babies have to be welcomed by the faces of the people who love them, their family. They should be born at home, so they know where home is. And there's a certain amount of logic to that, I guess, yeah? Anyway, he did allow Losa to continue to go to the clinic, and so every month we would go together. And the midwife was really clever because she started scheduling Losa at the very end of the day. And Losa would, she would walk with us back to Losa's house, and she would sit and have tea with us, and Vianney would come home. And she got to know Vianney. At first, they started talking about everything except health. They talked about the rugby team, or they gossiped about the neighbors, or they talked about the weather, or they talked about local political elections. Anything except health. They built a relationship. And then, eventually, once Vianney trusted her, she started talking about how at risk Losa was. The fact that she had already had 8 children. The fact that her most recent child, Pita, was only 14 months old when she became pregnant again. The fact that she really faced some severe risks if she didn't deliver her baby with a trained provider. And so gradually, 7 months into her pregnancy, Vianney agreed that she could deliver her baby at the health facility. On the night that Losa went into labor, it was of course raining. It's always raining, it's always the middle of the night. Anyway, put her in the back of the pickup truck, drove her down to the health facility. She literally delivered the baby 3 minutes after she entered the clinic door. And beautiful little baby Margarita was born. And she was healthy and happy. And then Losa went into postpartum hemorrhage. She would have died if she had not been in a facility with a trained provider who had blood, and there was an ambulance, or at least they could call for an ambulance, and they could get her to the hospital. So I like to say that my career in public health was born that night as well, because that was the night that I understood profoundly the importance of basic healthcare services. I also saw how a person, a woman who lived in a traditional culture, who lacked even basic decision-making about her own health, could be so separate from the health facilities that existed just 1 mile on a paved road from her. Any health planner would have told you that she had excellent access to health care, but there were so many cultural barriers to her accessing that health care. I want to be clear that my part of this was really small. I really give so much credit to the midwife who taught me everything, and who really guided my career in public health and who brought me to where I am today. So I tell that story just as an example of the transformation that happens with Peace Corps. It was transformative for me as a volunteer. It changed my life, and it changed my husband's life as well. But it also changed her life. It saved her life. So, you know, so much is similar in Peace Corps, and yet so much is different over the past 55 years. I served 32 years ago, so the world has changed tremendously since then. And the volunteer experience, while it is rooted in the community, volunteers now have so much more connectivity, so many more tools. They work in partnership with others. It's different now. And I would be really happy to talk about the reforms that we made at Peace Corps, and I hope someone asks me the question about that, because we have made extensive changes. In fact, we have undergone the most extensive reform effort that the agency has ever undertaken. Every single office has changed in terms of modernizing, becoming more effective and evidence-driven. But I don't really want to talk about that today. I have something else on my mind that I just want to talk to you about. In this increasingly complex and interconnected world, I really believe that our nation's security and economic prosperity depends on our ability to engage effectively and strategically with other nations. Productive, active engagement in the world and with the world is really key, both to our leadership globally and to the stability of the global order. Our own country is changing dramatically as well as we become more multicultural, and I really believe this is the strength of our country and has always been the strength, that the immigrants to our nation have always brought richness that has enhanced our country and enabled us to become a global partner. That means that it's essential for us to increase understanding and engagement and cooperation between all people, people of different races, different religions, different cultures, different economic classes, different worldviews. We all need to learn how to work together abroad, but also right here at home, even when it's hard and even when it's painful. It means that we need more interculturally competent Americans who can speak other languages, can understand other perspectives, can respect and appreciate other cultures. We need people who can negotiate with others who have very different worldviews and can find compromise and commonality with our own. And that is so that we can retain our position in the world and share our values effectively with others. And I think that's what all of you are all about right here at SAIS. You're about helping our country to become better global players, more effective global players. We're all working towards peace and justice, I believe. At this moment, in this new administration, we stand at a crossroads, I believe. The future is uncertain, probably more than any time I can remember in the past. There's a great deal of fear about the future of foreign aid as we struggle to understand what it means to be America first. And there are many who fear that there's going to be serious cutbacks in foreign aid, and I know that in Peace Corps we're also concerned about that as well. However, that may not happen, and I think we need to also understand that we shouldn't speculate when there's so little known. We have a choice on how we're going to embrace the future and the uncertainty right here. So I want to instead leave you with 3 challenges, and these are challenges that I've been really struggling with, and that's what I want to spend the balance of my time talking about. So the challenge number 1 is to take courage and really actively fight fear. Now I use the verb take very intentionally because in times of change, it's really easy to seek safety and to want to put your head down and to not take action. But times of change are really opportunities for boldness, I believe. Times of change are opportunities to stand up for our convictions. And times of change are opportunities also to step outside our comfort zone and to do something that really makes a difference. So I challenge you, and just as much as I challenge myself, to be courageous in the pursuit of what is good and right. I challenge us all to resist the urge to steer towards safety and to be instead bold and creative in our thinking, as we are now in a time when the future is unknown to us. And I think we really have to hold on to what we know is right and good while also listening to those who have perspectives that are very different. We have a very short time on this earth, so we really need to use our time courageously to help others, to stand up for the vulnerable, to speak out against injustice, to dream big dreams, and to bring about transformative change that will change the lives of others. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who was the president of Liberia and the first democratically elected female president, likes to say, the size of your dreams must always exceed your current capacity to achieve them. If your dreams are not big enough to scare you, then you're not dreaming big enough. So I want to tell you about a person I met, a Peace Corps volunteer. I'm going to use examples of Peace Corps because that's what I was asked to speak about. This is a Peace Corps volunteer named Kinsey Norton, who is a volunteer in Kyrgyzstan. And she serves as a teacher at a boarding school for the blind and visually impaired in Kyrgyzstan, in Osh. Many of the students at that school have been abandoned by their families. And those who have not been abandoned have families who just really don't know how to take care of them. In Kyrgyzstan, as in many parts of the world, those who are blind and disabled are considered a curse and an embarrassment. They are often kept within the home. They are not taught that they have any future in front of them. And also, they are really seriously vulnerable to crime. As in the United States, those who are blind especially are extra vulnerable to all forms of crime, but especially sexual assault. So women in particular are vulnerable. Kinsey is blind. She is the only blind staff member in the school and the only independent professional woman that either the teachers or the students have ever met. The fact that she has come to live and work among them from faraway Minnesota is absolutely unfathomable to them. Kyrgyzstan is a really hard place to work. It is a hard place to work, and there's no support for the blind, and none of the ADA accommodations that we have in our country to make it possible for someone to even navigate the roads. But she has incredible courage in that she actually chose to go to Kyrgyzstan because she knew that there was a school that had never had a blind teacher. And she feels a very special calling to be there, and that's why she chose that place. Because she is blind herself, she is uniquely able to empathize, motivate, and serve as a role model for those students and teachers as well. She has a special place in her heart for the girls, knowing that they are even more vulnerable than the boys. She desperately wants them to have a normal, independent life. She wants them to be valued by others. She tells them that they are beautiful and that they're smart and that if they work hard, they can get a job and they can have a career and they can be independent just like she is. She talks to them about tough issues too. She talks to them about how they're going to have to study twice as hard as any seeing person in order to get ahead. She talks to them about the risks of sexual assault and how to prevent it to the best of their ability and how to avoid getting ripped off in the market, as they often are. Kinsey is a role model unlike any other they have ever known. They trust her and they love her and she loves them. I was incredibly moved by Kinsey when I was there because of her courage. You cannot imagine the sacrifice that she made. She's literally putting her life on the line to serve those who are so isolated from society. She was incredibly moving. She's a hero. She saw a need and she stood up and said, I'm willing to be there. So, we all have very different situations, but I challenge all of us, myself included, to stand up, take courage, be a positive role model, and make a difference by acting boldly. So challenge number 2, cultivate strange bedfellows. So that phrase was made popular by George Dudley Warner, and it referred to politics, usually in a pejorative way. But I really think that strange bedfellows are important and good, because we need to cultivate supportive relationships with those who think differently from us, especially within the international community, if we want others to understand the importance of our work. And I think that's especially important right now when it's being questioned. We in the development and diplomacy community really need to reach out much more proactively to the business, military, and domestic audiences. We have so much to learn from them, And we need them to understand that by helping other nations build the foundations of prosperity, stability, and peace, we assure our own leadership, economic growth, and security. We need strange bedfellows to carry the message that economically stable countries that respect its people and invest in its people are safer, more prosperous, and better global partners. We need their voices to promote the fact around the world that by investing in the people of developing nations, we ensure that they feel a connection with the United States, that they share our values, and want to partner with us. And that's important, not only for our country, but for the rest of the world. And by the way, I think it's the best thing to do for humanity as well. In the words of Martin Luther King, we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We need all stakeholders to recognize the importance of our work. I want to tell you a story about the importance of strange bedfellows. And this is a story that some of you may have heard. I see some of you who served in Peace Corps, so you may have heard this story already. But a couple months ago, I had the opportunity to meet Ambassador Carl Eikenberry. And he was the Lieutenant General for the U.S. Army, was a Lieutenant General in the U.S. Army, but then he was also appointed the ambassador, sort of the Uber ambassador in Afghanistan. And there was a particular battle there for Helmand province. It was a very strategic piece of land. And during the course of that battle, 15 Marines lost their lives. It was a very bloody battle, and it lasted a long time. But eventually, the Allied forces were successful in defeating the Taliban. So he decided to go out and see this reclaimed territory and make a relationship with the chieftains there. And when he arrived, one of the local chieftains came up to him and began speaking to him very animatedly. It was clear that this guy had something very important to say, but he was speaking in Pashtun. So Ambassador Eikenberry called over the ambassador, or the interpreter, and the man spoke to him, and the interpreter said, well, this gentleman is asking about Rick. Is there someone named Rick in your group? And Ambassador Eikenberry kind of looked around, and he said, Rick, I don't think there's anyone named Rick on my detail here. And so the interpreter, interpreted it to the chieftain. And then the man spoke back again very animatedly, and this is what he said. He said, Rick, Peace Corps, Peace Corps. Rick was a Peace Corps volunteer 40 years ago. He said, Rick came here as an English teacher. He was my English teacher, and he was also like a brother to me. He and I got to know each other really well, and he changed my life forever, and I know I changed his life as well. And when I heard the Americans were coming, I was hoping desperately that Rick was among you. Ambassador Eikenberry told me that he went home that night and he could not sleep because he thought about those 15 Marines who had given their lives for that piece of land. He said, those 15 Marines, their names will never be known to that community. But that one Peace Corps volunteer who served there 40 years ago was still beloved by that community, loved like a brother. And then, he said, that is how I began to understand the importance and the lasting strength of the relationships of Peace Corps volunteers. And he said, beyond that, it's not only Peace Corps, but also USAID, any relationship that brings our people together in peace. But at the foundation of this is a relationship of trust that is built between this community and Americans. No one would expect that the Peace Corps and the military would team up very actively. But he has since become one of our most ardent supporters. And also, he's a big supporter of USAID and other NGOs. He frequently speaks about the importance of our agency and others. In addition, Peace Corps has been working very closely with the US military in recent years. Especially, we partnered around language acquisition, around sexual assault, risk reduction and response, and about disaster preparedness and response. So Peace Corps has actually, sought to connect itself with those parts of the military where we can learn from each other. So cultivate strange bedfellows. They will enrich our lives, they will promote us, and we will learn something from them as well. So that's my second challenge. And my last challenge is just be the change you wish to see in the world. Those of us who work in international development and diplomacy have been given an incredible gift. We have the privilege of being able to step out of our own culture and our own country and our own national boundaries to be able to live and work among people from other lands. In many cases, they have welcomed us into their homes, into their families, into their workplaces, into their challenges and opportunities. We do this work because we love it, because it gives our life meaning. We believe it's important for our own nation, and our lives have been changed by those with whom we work. Our work takes us to some of the world's most daunting places. And in those places, we invariably find proof of humanity's incredible resilience. In some of the humblest corners of the world, we find people who live with love and dignity and kindness, no matter how little they have or how much they have to overcome. We find people who stand tall and hold strong, even when it seems that they have every reason to break. These are the people in countries around the world who inspire us, who motivate us, and who keep us humble. These are the people who teach us even as we teach them. By working side by side, together we've made the incredible development progress that has been documented in recent years. At a time when the nation's focus has been so firmly fixed on everything that divides us, we in the development community have a singular advantage. We have seen through our own work and the work of our colleagues that finding common ground and fostering cooperation in the face of seemingly intractable differences is not just the best way forward, it is often the only way forward. Because we have seen the costs of division and the stakes. Today, as we gather at a time of tremendous change for our nation and our world, I urge us as a community to bring back the hard-won lessons of development back home. I urge us to think back of Peace Corps and the founding premise, the fact that people of different perspectives, different races, different religions need to understand and truly appreciate each other in order to truly bring peace and unity. We know from our international work that it isn't just about the hot air that ignites the airwaves or fuels headlines. It's really about the fear of others that hardens walls between people. It's about anger that radicalizes and isolates people. It's about hatred that rips at the seams of society, and we've seen the cost of this in other countries as well. So I challenge us to open our hearts and our minds to our own countrymen and women who stand tall and hold strong, even though they battle issues very different from us. Opioid addiction, limited opportunities for education, implicit bias, inadequate documentation, job loss. Can we listen to our own people who hold different views and perspectives with respect and appreciation as much as we would those from other countries? Can we honor the differences between our own people and refuse to abide by bigotry, hatred, and intolerance of any kind? Does it make it harder for us to tolerate difference if the person who is different from us is a fellow citizen rather than someone from another country? As we work to promote peace and justice overseas, can we also commit to doing the same thing right here at home? Can we find a way to step into each other's shoes and really, truly listen to one another, even if they voted for a different candidate? Is that possible? Can we reject alternative facts, but allow others to speak their truth from their own personal perspective, even though it's radically different from our own? In the words of Gandhi, can we be the change we wish to see in the world? If we're a liberal urbanite, like I am, can we really actively seek to understand the life of someone who lives in Appalachia? Can we do that actively? Not just read Hillbilly Elegy, but really actually try to meet people who come from somewhere different and understand their perspective and have that inform our worldview? If we're conservative on immigration, can we get to know an undocumented worker, truly understand their reality, what they're fleeing, what their family situation is, how hard they work for the very values that we ourselves value? Can we do that? There's a choice when all we see around us is rancor and division, when all we see are borders and divides. Because here's what I've seen, and this was started in Peace Corps, but it has been confirmed throughout my career. Finding common ground is a matter of choice. Even when we do not see eye to eye with someone, we can stand with them heart to heart. We can choose to build bridges where others would build walls. We can choose courage. We can choose truth. We can choose healing, and we can choose unity. But it takes work. Thank you. So, I'm happy to take any questions you have now about Peace Corps, about my career, about anything. Yes?
Hi, my name is Emma McAvoy. First of all, I would like to thank you for your service as Peace Corps Director. I'm a current volunteer in Lesotho.
Oh, wow, you're home on leave?
I'm currently medevaced.
Okay.
I'll be making my way back to Lesotho next week.
Wonderful.
And my fellow volunteers and I are currently in phase 2, so we're very early in our service. And I was wondering if you, as an RPCV, have any advice for us as we try to figure out our roles in our communities.
Sure. Excellent question, and thank you. First of all, before I do that, I want to see how many return volunteers are there here? So, oh my gosh. Well, thank you for your service. Wow, that's amazing. Some advice. I guess my best advice would be sort of what I was talking about. Spend a lot of time getting to know people. Work on your language, because that is, key to being able to have a deep relationship. But the thing that is, you'll do a lot of great work, but your work may not be what you even think it will be, because you're there to respond to the needs of your community. And you won't be able to figure it out unless you really develop deep relationships of trust. And that is where the beauty of the Peace Corps experience is. It is what makes us different from any other experience. So focus on building relationships with people of all kinds, not just a village leader, not just your counterpart, not just your host family even, but a whole wide range of people, so you can understand diverse perspectives and really begin to see the world through their eyes, because that will help you to be a more effective agent of change. And it'll build credibility. And they'll let you in on things that will help you really understand the nature of both the opportunities and the barriers there. So that's my best advice. Yeah. Hi. I also want to point out that we have students in Bologna. Yeah, Bologna. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Carrie. My name is Bakhtash. We've met before. It's good to see you again. How are you?
Nice to see you. Yeah.
I want to thank you as well for your service in the Peace Corps and directors of the Peace Corps. Peace Corps touched my life. I'm a direct byproduct of the Peace Corps serving in Afghanistan. My father was taught by the Peace Corps, a Peace Corps volunteer named Eric in the 1960s. We're refugees in Pakistan, and through my father's experience and or ties with USAID and Peace Corps, we were given political asylum to come to the United States. So Peace Corps does make a difference. So I served in the Peace Corps as a result. I served in Mozambique, 2005, 2007. Great country, go. I'm curious to know two things, actually. Since there's so many Peace Corps volunteers in the room, we all get this question. We all get the question, what was Peace Corps like for you? And, we could talk about Peace Corps for days and days and days and days. And so I'm curious to know, number one, what your elevator pitch is when people ask you what Peace Corps was like for you. And then secondly, I'd like to know what the greatest misconception is professionally that people have of the Peace Corps.
Great questions, both of them. The really short answer, like one sentence answer when people ask me about it, is I just say it will change your life and change your worldview in ways that are completely unpredictable. What was the second question? Misconceptions. I think a lot of people think that Peace Corps is, in terms of its development work, back where it was, for much of our history, honestly. It used to be the Peace Corps volunteers were working alone in their community, isolated out there, with not as part of a larger development network. And over the last 7 years, we have really worked to change that. The work of the volunteer now is very much done in partnership with other development partners. We are there at the invitation of our nation. We work under their national development plans. And we really see ourselves as the last mile agents of a larger development community. So our volunteers are really actively working with other development partners, such as USAID, such as their own ministries, such as the UN agencies, such as other NGOs, local and international. Our volunteers are trained with a much more rigorous technical training that is based on both best practices that have been established through the global community through intense monitoring and evaluation. So we train our volunteers to work on those interventions that have proven through evidence to be most effective at achieving development impact. And we work in partnership with those partners as a last mile partner to make sure that those interventions that are funded by USAID, for example, which are much more expensive, frankly, that they're really implemented by the community, implemented properly. Even more importantly, I would say owned by the community, that they are monitored and evaluated and that they are sustained over time. We report on the same indicators as our development partners and our nation. And so, meaning our host nation. So we are much more a part of the development network than we used to be. And I would say that is the part that people don't understand. I think and it is still true. It is still true that you may get out there and you end up working on something that's very different from what you thought it would be. But the work is much more rigorously developed, I would say, with much more professional training and with much more connection to the outside world. We have 3,000 volunteers who are working on Feed the Future. We have more than 1,000 volunteers who are working as part of PEPFAR. We have very active, several thousand, more than 2,000 volunteers assisting with, in our initiative called Stomp Out Malaria, which is part of the President's Malaria Initiative. So we are working in active engagement with our whole of government development initiatives. They're still at the last mile, but they are the last mile. And that's where it's important. That's where it all breaks down, frankly. So, and the other thing is that our development partners really recognize the importance of Peace Corps and actively seek to employ them when they come back. So, yes. Oh, yes, of course. Nice to see you.
I'm sorry
yes.
you're not there anymore. I'm going to ask you a political question, but could I? Well,
Sure.
thank you. Ask a political question, but comment on what you just said. You said we have to reach out to people who are different. What I'm doing now, once Hillary Clinton lost, and I saw her in Beijing in 1995, so I've been a big fan ever since, is do two things here that have to do with the community locally. I'm a reading partner literacy tutor, if you've ever heard of it. Join, do it. I do it one morning a week in Seton School, which is in Shaw. And the other thing I just did, I worked for the World Food Program as well, is to do a joyful food fair across the river in Anacostia through Martha's Table. Fun. It was like being back in Africa. I saw nobody white for 6 hours. I loved all of it. But I can't cross the river and speak to people who work for Trump. So how are you doing it, and what's happening next with the Peace Corps, if you have an answer for that? That's really hard to do.
Well, I think what we have to, you're right, that's really hard to do. And I think we have to stand up for what is good and right, but we also have to listen and understand. I have lived on the East Coast and been an urbanite since I was 20 years old, but I come from northern Michigan, a town of 1,000 people, and I can tell you that there's probably about 4 people in that town that voted for Hillary Clinton. But what I can do is listen to them and understand their concerns, their fears, and then take that with me back here and talk to the folks who are actually working in government agencies and have something, that are in a position of power. I come back and I do my own thing. I do quite a lot of work with ASPAN, which is Arlington Street People's Network. But I want to do more. And, I think that we have to better understand. If we develop a relationship with people, then we can communicate our perspectives in a way that is not threatening to them, and then we can also listen to them. It's the same principle as Peace Corps. We're very tolerant of conservative religious views or traditional practices when it's some other country. But when we come to our own country, we have a hard time with, let's say, very conservative, right-wing evangelical Christians. I'm speaking for myself now. I have had to really seriously say to myself, I'm going to be open-minded when I talk to folks. I'm going to listen to their perspectives. By developing relationships, we may change their perspectives. We may open their minds, and they may open our minds too. And if we come back and we have access to people and networks that can make change, then it's our responsibility to reflect that position to people in power. I'm no longer in the government, but I am part of a broader network, and I do still know people. And I am much more focused on building unity in our country, but I also think we have to speak truth. And when truth is, there's not, like alternative facts, really, those are lies. And I think we have to speak out. And that's really hard if you continue to be in the government. I have to say that I really admire and respect people who remain in government, because we need good people in government now more than ever before. So you have to walk a balance between reaching out and understanding other perspectives and building relationships that will enable you to grow and enable them to grow, but also speaking up against things to be wrong. There's an acting director who's very capable, Sheila Crowley. She was a country director in Romania and Indonesia, and she then went on to be our acting associate director for VERS, Volunteer Recruitment and Selection, and so I was able to appoint her before I left, and eventually the president will appoint somebody new, and we have no reason to believe that he will put someone who is anti-Peace Corps in. We're very hopeful that there are some really great Republicans who would be phenomenal leaders of the Peace Corps. We have put forward their names, and we're hopeful. I think that we need to assume the best until the worst becomes obvious. That's the other thing too. If we just, and that's part of having an open mind. If we just assume the worst all the time, then it makes it very hard to have a relationship. I think we have to be open to the possibility that they will do the right thing until something happens to prove it wrong. Yes?
We have a question from Bologna. What are some things a former Peace Corps volunteer should be doing today to address the third goal, helping Americans get a better understanding of other cultures, especially since you mentioned that that's important today?
Yeah. Are there returned Peace Corps volunteers in Bologna as well? I'm just wondering. Yay! Oh, look at almost all. Thank you for your service. I think there are things that we can do even now, even while you're a student. There are wonderful active ways of serving in your community. I think that's important. But I also think that it's important just to, and this is part of the building relationship. I don't think you have to do anything more than reaching out to people who are different from you, and to show that our country really is a country of generosity, that we have people who are open-minded and are generous and who care about others. I think, by living a life, the life of a Peace Corps volunteer, of living the values that Peace Corps stands for, I think we are doing the third goal. But if you can actively, continue to serve, that is a wonderful thing too. And I really want to be able to do that. I'm in a time of transition myself right now. I'm trying to figure out what I can take on in my new role. So. Sure. You want me to tell you more about my new role? Okay, let me take another question first, and then if we have time, we'll come back. Yes?
Hi, I'm 17 and I'm very interested in this. So I was wondering, would you recommend I get involved before college or after college, and what's the process of joining?
Joining Peace Corps? You pretty much need to be a college graduate in order to be accepted in the Peace Corps. So that's the first thing, go to college and graduate. When we look at prospective applicants, so in terms of setting yourself up so that you will be accepted, we really look at people's character, I would say, and their history of service. So if you want, one thing I would recommend is begin service in any way you can right now. You can volunteer in high schools. A lot of high schools have service programs, far more than when I was in high school. Maybe you can read to young children, or maybe you can be a peer counselor, or maybe you can support kids who are learning English as a second language, or maybe you can help out in a food bank. There are lots of ways to serve your community. And to encourage others in your school to be open-minded and broad-minded when it comes to difference, thinking, around approaching difference. In college, if you can continue to serve, that will be important. There are some degrees that will make it easier for you to get into Peace Corps than others. But that doesn't mean that if you don't have a technical degree that you can't get in the Peace Corps. I was a political science major, so really no experience to speak of. But if you happen to study math or science or environmental health or public health or education, any of these things will just give you a little leg up. We have 6 sectors, Peace Corps has 6 sectors: education, health, agriculture, environment, community economic development, which is business, small business, and youth development. So any degree in those areas will be helpful, but not necessary. I would say that more than anything, we look at the character of the individual and their history of service. And language is important too. If you want to serve in a Spanish-speaking country, then you should learn Spanish, because it's very competitive nowadays, and it's pretty much a requirement that you speak Spanish in order to go to a Spanish-speaking country. It will enhance your chances. And if you speak French, then West Africa is also available to you. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Your service in the Peace Corps as a volunteer and a director. I am slated to depart in a couple of weeks from Myanmar as the first group.
Oh, wow.
And
that's fantastic.
wasn't expecting that, but so as a recovering investment banker, from one free agent to another, I can't help but, having served abroad before, I can't help but think about the cost-benefit analysis to myself and my community afterwards. What do you think, in the current political climate, is the future for a returned Peace Corps volunteer in 2019 and beyond?
In terms of your own personal...
Yeah, for all of us who want to make a shift towards diplomacy and foreign affairs, and very much in an investment and economic oriented setting.
I have to believe it's going to be high. Because like it or not, no matter what we hear now, and I think we don't really understand what it means to be America first. We have not heard that there's going to be a massive cut in the 150 account, which is the international assistance group. So, but the fact is that the world is more interconnected than ever before and more global. And we're going to need Americans who speak other languages, understand other cultures, that have experience on the ground, can manage multicultural teams, who understand what it's like to do business overseas, understand emerging markets. It's just, it's the way it is. Employers now, regardless of what's happening in the government, employers now want globally competent employees, because that is the world and that is our country. Our country is increasingly multicultural as well. So I believe that the environment will be strong for return volunteers, regardless of what happens to the foreign aid budget. And I also think that this is one administration, but administrations change too. So I would say that you need to take a long view. And I believe that the return on investment will be very high. The return on investment for Peace Corps service is incredibly high in terms of government dollars spent. We don't do a very good job of calculating that return on investment. That would be a really good PhD topic for somebody. But because it's hard to measure lives changed, right? And it's hard to even measure the impact in the community, because what we do is human development, and human development takes generations really to see, or at least takes decades to see the true impact. I have tons of great stories about lives changed, but it's most often easiest to see change over a period of time. I mean, that's, in evaluating any program, you need to look over time. But when you're looking at human development, it takes even longer. It's planting a seed for a tree under whose shade you'll never sit. So I'm optimistic for a recovering investment banker to going into the Peace Corps. I think you'll be even more sought after. And the proof of this is that companies like IBM, Delta, Xerox, UPS, some of the largest employers in our country have become partners in something called the Employers of National Service. So they have signed on saying that they want to hire volunteers, Peace Corps volunteers and AmeriCorps volunteers, and they put a question in their application, job application, asking if people have served their nation through Peace Corps service or AmeriCorps or others. We have countless big corporations that come to us and say, will you train our executives? We don't do that. But they understand that the most effective managers in this global environment are people who understand other cultures and speak other languages and have a global worldview. You were waiting patiently.
Yes, thank you for speaking today. I've been looking to speak with you here in the Peace Corps and in the development world. So my story is a bit different. I was relieved from the Peace Corps after addressing food safety and security concerns within my homestay. And my question for you is, what would you do in my position if you were forced to leave the program by staff but wish to serve? Who in the agency is tasked with listening to and giving equal weight to the voice of volunteers? And who can I speak to who is tasked with verifying the validity of the comments made by staff which were used to send me home? If no one in the agency is tasked with verifying statements made by staff, how is it ethical to remove someone from the organization without cause? Thank you.
Where did you serve?
I served in Belize, and I'm representing for many people in the program today.
I don't know anything about your case, but I am very sorry to hear that. And I will give you the name of someone to speak to. We don't have an ombuds person who is maybe a person that would be considered for that kind of thing, but there are many people who speak to volunteers. And the IG is one. The Inspector General does have, what?
I've submitted my
Okay, that's
claim.
good. I mean, that's the most logical first course, is the Inspector General. But I can give you a person in the director's office who you can talk to as well.
Thank you very much.
I don't know the specifics at all of your case, and so I would want you to get fair treatment, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Speak to me afterwards, and I'm going to put you in touch with someone particular. Okay?
We have somebody very patient over here.
Okay. Russ, I'm sorry. Let me just, Tanvi, did you have something?
I just think that it might be worth it, since this question was raised, for you to highlight some of the reforms that you put into place in the last 3 years that, might, if we have time at the end.
Sure, I will do that. Let's have Russ's question, and then I will do that, okay?
Well, thank you. I wanted to build on your initial points of being optimistic. And now that you're no longer the director of Peace Corps, I'm sure throughout your whole term you've been thinking about the future of Peace Corps. We've always had a goal of getting 10,000, 20,000 people. But what would you like to see if you had no political or economic restrictions in moving Peace Corps forward over the next decade?
I would love to expand the Peace Corps. JFK said that he would know that our country is in a good place when we had 100,000 Peace Corps volunteers a year. Of course, that never happened. And there is absorptive capacity. It's not possible for the Peace Corps to grow exponentially because we need to spend a lot of time doing site identification and working hard to support our volunteers. So I would love to see, I'd be delighted to see a doubling of Peace Corps, and we did have that as a goal within the next 5 years. It is possible to double the size of Peace Corps if the budget was there, and it wouldn't cost that much. It would cost about $600 million, which is a drop in the budget, a drop in the U.S. government. It's just absolutely, it's a rounding error. So it would be very easy for our government to do that. But we would need to accompany it with strong support for our volunteers. So some of the reforms that we have made, and we are really trying to be more volunteer-centered. Let me just highlight a few. A lot of work around sexual assault risk reduction and response. Around medical care, we've improved the quality of our medevac services and our post-service medical care because there's a small number of people every year who return with lingering medical problems. So we've created a post-service unit that helps them to be able to navigate with FICA, which is really hard, to be honest with you. When you come back from Peace Corps service, you're no longer receiving your medical care from Peace Corps, but rather from FICA, which is really designed more for carpal tunnel syndrome or bad backs or what have you. We have really dramatically improved the quality of our technical training and program support, monitoring and evaluation. I talked about that a little bit more in partnership with others. So we've created partnerships with USAID around food security, with PEPFAR around HIV, President's Malaria Initiative, again, I mentioned that. We're part of the Global Education Framework. Let Girls Learn, a partnership with Michelle Obama, which has been really great in terms of elevating the importance of girls' education and empowerment. We have worked a lot on intercultural competence, diversity, and inclusion. We have made the goal of becoming an agency that reflects the beautiful multicultural nation that we are. And what we have done is we have diversity recruiters in every region. And then we are actively trying to recruit a more diverse staff as well. But it kind of follows because so much of our staff comes from volunteers that we really need to work on a diverse volunteer base. But even more than that, we need to work on inclusion. And that gets to some of the things that we're talking about here, is we need to understand that for a Black American, they're going to have a different experience than for a white American or an Asian American or an LGBTQ American. And so being able to really understand and appreciate each other's realities, to appreciate them as a person, and then to be able to support them with kind of intercultural skills and tools that are necessary so that volunteers can support each other and so that staff can support our volunteers better. So that's been a big priority for us. When I started, we had 14% of our volunteers self-reported as a racial or ethnic minority, and this past year was 32%. So it's really grown. We've also really sought to increase our visibility and our brand, so that means, and also we've made extensive changes to our application process so that it's easier and faster to apply for Peace Corps, but also you can choose where you want to go. You can choose to apply for where you want to go and what job you want to do. It also has meant that we've tripled the number of applications, and it's much more competitive to get into the Peace Corps now, too. But more than anything, we've sought to be a volunteer-centered organization, which is why I'm so disturbed to hear what you're saying. And I want to listen to you, and I want to help you at least get heard. I mean, we need to understand all. I don't need to understand, but people in charge need to understand all of your truth as well as whatever else is out there. And so I really want to make sure that we set up systems, that the Peace Corps sets up systems that will allow it to really support its volunteers, especially those who speak up. Absolutely, I agree with that completely. We have very strong relationships with our Inspector General, which is good. And we have created a lot of peer support networks in countries that will support volunteers as well. So that's sort of a broad overview of our reform. One more question? Thank you all for coming and being so patient today.
This could be a tough one. Given the current political environment and budget constraints, what is the best strategic argument for continuation or expansion of the Peace Corps? And I ask this because over the 50 years or so of the Peace Corps, the justification for the Peace Corps has really changed. At first, it was kind of helping the third world, development assistance, and then it kind of became volunteer spirit, idealism, responding to young Americans. and then it was giving back to U.S. society. How can Peace Corps make America a better place when people come back? And then most recently, it's national security, linking Peace
Everything
Corps
is national security now.
directly with the military and with USAID and the so-called establishment. So it's fascinating, this evolution, but what argument would you make with the Trump people on why Peace Corps should continue, as we all want it to?
I would make two arguments. First is that the return on investment, it's absolutely the cheapest way to put a trained American into the field, where they can support communities with good development assistance, but also build positive relationships between our country and the rest of the world. Let me just give you one example, another innovation that came under this administration, and that is the development of the Global Health Service Partnership, which is a program to send doctors and nurses to now 5 countries in Africa. And these doctors and nurses are incredibly capable people. For example, we had the head of Dartmouth Pediatrics at Dartmouth Hospital was one of our volunteers. The head of obstetrics and gynecology at the medical school at Indiana University, the head of emergency services in LA County. These are just an example of some of our more than 250 doctors and nurses who have served through this Global Health Service Partnership. They live like volunteers. So they're working, receiving a compensation below $200 a month, I think. I don't know how much they get, but not much more than that. In total, it costs about $60,000 a year for the US government to support that doctor. Now, I worked in the public health industry for 20 years, and I know how much it costs to spend a doctor overseas to work for 1 year in public health, doing the same kind of work. It costs about $450,000 when you factor in all of the benefits, the large salary, the housing, the school, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an incredible return on investment right there. That's just an example. So the cost, I would say that if you're interested in saving money, reducing government spending, an investment in the Peace Corps is incredibly cost effective. But the second argument I would make is that it is the best way to build bridges between our nation and others, not at the leader level, but with the people. And we know from evidence that, and I said this in my speech, that countries that respect human rights and invest in their own people and want to partner with our nation in the world are going to be safer, more prosperous, and will lead to a safer world. And Peace Corps is a very important program. It is one of the most important diplomatic efforts we can make. I can't tell you how many times I've gone overseas to visit with the president, and he will tell me, Peace Corps, or even ambassadors will tell me this too. They'll say Peace Corps is the most important program we have here because it really builds bonds of friendship between our country and our host nation. And that's incredibly important. And then our return volunteers grow up and become the global leaders of tomorrow. And so, that's where I wish we could do a return on investment study, is really and we're starting to do, the Peace Corps is starting to do that. They are developing a longitudinal study that will track the career progression of volunteers over the next 20 years to see what we can say about the longer term impact of Peace Corps on the United States from a return volunteer standpoint. So I think that's it.
It is. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, yeah, so I'm very excited. I'll be working with PCI. I'll be their president and CEO. It's a wonderful NGO that does, its mission is really to empower people through enhancing health, ending hunger, and overcoming hardship. And it's based in San Diego, has an office here in Washington, D.C., and it's just poised for growth, and I'm looking forward to being part of that. No, I'm going to be here. Yeah, I'll go to San Diego, but I'll be based here in D.C. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for coming. Especially thank you to Carrie for having us all be here. There are still more sandwiches, so please.